Hey everyone, welcome back. Ready to tackle something that trips up even native English speakers. Today we're doing a deep dive into talking about time, like how to actually say when things happen without getting all tangled up. We've got this awesome video that breaks down all the little words we use, in, on, at. Those ones that seem simple but could be super sneaky. Ever get those mixed up? I know I have. But luckily, we've got an expert here to guide us through the time-bending maze of English grammar. Okay, let's start with the basics. In, on, at. How do we use those correctly when we're talking about time?
Well, you can think of it like a map. In is for the big picture stuff, like in May or in 2024.
The zoomed out view. Got it.
Right. Then you zoom in a bit and use on for specific days or dates. So like on Monday or on June 15th.
Okay, makes sense. So on is more specific than in.
Exactly. And then at is for those really precise times, like at 6:30 p.m. or at midnight.
So it's like at is the laser focus. But I'm sure there are some exceptions to these rules, right? English loves its curveballs.
Of course. At night is a good example. You wouldn't say in the night.
Oh, yeah, that's true. And doesn't American English and British English use those a little differently too, like with weekends?
You got it. Americans usually say on the weekend, but in British English you often hear at the weekend.
So it's like there are different dialects of time talk. Do you think other languages have these kinds of quirks too?
Oh, definitely. Most languages have their own unique ways of expressing time. It's not always a one-to-one translation.
It's fascinating how these little words can cause so much confusion. It makes you appreciate the complexity of language. Okay, let's put our knowledge to the test. Let's say you're planning a picnic with a friend. How would you use in, on, and at to tell them when and where?
I might say, let's have a picnic in July on the 10th at noon.
Perfect. That paints a very clear picture.
All right.
Feeling good about the basics now. But I know in can be a bit of a trickster. We also use it for things that will happen within a certain time frame, like I'll be there in 10 minutes.
Right. That's another common use of in. You use it with a time period to show that something will happen within that time frame. Usually you use it for future events.
So it's like saying, this is going to happen and it'll be done before this amount of time passes.
Exactly.
That's pretty cool how one word can convey both when something will happen and how long until it happens.
It's one of the nuances of the English language.
Okay, now for a pair of words that I constantly mix up, by and until, I feel like I'm always using the wrong one. What's the key difference?
By is all about deadlines. Be there by 5 p.m. means 5 p.m. is the absolute latest you can arrive.
So it's like a hard stop.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But until is more about continuous action that lasts up to a certain point. The library is open until 9 p.m. means it's open nonstop until that time.
So by is hitting the target. Until is the whole journey leading up to it. I remember once telling my friend, I'll be there until 7:30, thinking it meant I'd arrive by then. They showed up super early. These little words can cause some real-life misunderstandings.
Absolutely. They might seem small, but they make a huge difference in meaning.
All right, it's time for a quick recap. In, on, at, those for setting the scene. And then we have by and until, which are all about deadlines and duration. But hold on, there are even more words that we use when talking about things happening at the same time. During, while, at, and as. How do those work?
Think of these words as helping you choreograph simultaneous actions in your sentences. During usually needs a noun after it, like during the meeting or during my lunch break, but while needs a whole sentence to follow it, like while I was driving or while we were talking.
So during likes to keep it short and sweet, while goes into more detail.
Exactly.
And what about at and as? I feel like they also pop up when things are happening at the same time.
Right. At is like taking a snapshot of a very specific moment. Like at that moment I knew I had to leave, or at the sound of the bell, everyone stood up.
So at pinpoints a very specific moment, like freezing time.
Exactly. As, on the other hand, usually shows something happening gradually or over a period of time. Think, as the sun rose, or as I grew older.
So as shows things happening over a longer stretch of time, like a slow motion effect.
You got it.
Wow, it's amazing how these tiny words can create such different feelings and images in our minds. And then there are just as and as soon as, which sound even more dramatic. What's the difference there?
Just as is like two things happening in perfect sync at the exact same moment. Imagine, just as I reached for the phone, it started ringing. It emphasizes that perfect coincidence.
Ooh, spooky. It's like destiny or something.
Right. And as soon as means something happened immediately after something else. So as soon as the rain stopped, we went outside. It emphasizes that immediate sequence of events.
Got it. So just as is like a cosmic collision, and as soon as is more of a domino effect?
I like that analogy.
Okay, feeling pretty confident about those now. But what about talking about how long things last? Seems like the MVP in those situations, right?
Oh, 4 is definitely a superstar. It tells us how long something continues in all sorts of tenses. I've been working here for 5 years. She was waiting for hours. They'll be traveling for a month.
4 is like the reliable workhorse of time expressions.
Exactly. And it even goes beyond specific time periods. Think of those vague expressions like for ages or for a while, which are perfect when you don't need to be exact, but still want to convey a sense of duration.
I guess for ages feels a lot longer than for a while, though.
You're right. There's definitely a difference in the perceived length of time between those two.
It's so interesting how we can communicate so much about time without even using numbers.
Absolutely.
But let's not forget about the verb take, which can also tell us how long something lasts. Like, it takes 20 minutes to get to the office.
Right. Take is great for focusing on the duration of an action. It's like having a built-in stopwatch.
So take is about measuring the time something takes to happen.
Yes, exactly.
And what about over? Usually means above, but we also use it to talk about something happening within a longer time frame, like over the summer or over the years.
Good catch. Over doesn't mean the entire duration, but rather at some point within that period. So over the weekend means sometime during those 2 days, not necessarily the whole time.
So it's like over creates this container of time and the action happens somewhere inside it.
Exactly.
Wow, we've covered a lot of ground today. It's amazing how many nuances there are to talking about time in English.
It's definitely one of the trickier aspects of the language.
But hey, I feel a lot more confident now. And it's comforting to know that even native speakers struggle with this sometimes. Language is a journey, right?
Absolutely.
Well, buckle up, time travelers. We're just getting started.
It really is amazing, isn't it, how just changing these little words can shift our whole perspective on time.
Right, like we've got these little grammatical time machines in, on, at, by, until.
Exactly. And speaking of time travel, let's talk about how we use language to create timelines, to show the order that things happen in.
Okay, I'm ready to become a master of time sequencing. What are the key words we need for that?
Well, we have to start with the classics before and after. They're like signposts clearly marking the sequence of events.
So if I wanted to say that I ate breakfast and then went for a run, I'd say, after I ate breakfast, I went for a run.
Perfect. Or you could say, I ate breakfast before I went for a run. Same events, just a different way of framing it.
It's like choosing which direction you want to travel through time. Are there any other time travel tools we can use?
Don't forget about during, while, and as, which we talked about earlier with simultaneous actions. They can also be used to show overlapping events on a timeline.
So I listened to a podcast during my commute. Means the podcast was happening within that block of commute time.
You got it. It's
Yeah.
like zooming in on that part of your day. And while I was cooking dinner, my friend called, shows those two things happening at the same time.
And something like, as the sun was setting, we arrived at the beach, gives that image of the sunset happening gradually as we were arriving.
Exactly. You're really getting the hang of this. Now, let's add until and by the time to our time travel toolkit. These are great for emphasizing the endpoint of something.
Oh, those two are my nemesis. I always mix them up.
Don't worry, I'll help you untangle them. Until highlights that something continued up to a specific point. Like, I worked until 5 p.m. means the work stopped at 5. But by the time I got home, dinner was already ready, emphasizes that the dinner being ready happened before you arrived home.
So until focuses on what's happening leading UP to a certain point,
Yes,
while by the time Kula focuses on what's been completed by that point.
exactly. You've got it.
It's making me wonder, do you think some cultures are just better at expressing these time relationships than others? I mean, do languages with really specific tenses make it easier or maybe even harder?
That's a really interesting question. It would be fascinating to look into that.
Okay, let's ramp up the drama. How about words like as soon as and the moment? Those really add a sense of urgency and excitement.
They're like the action heroes of time expressions. As soon as, you mean something happened immediately after something else. As soon as the concert ended, we all rushed to the exits. It's almost like a cause and effect relationship in time.
And the moment I saw him, I knew it was trouble. Really emphasizes that instant recognition, right?
Yeah.
Like, bam!
Right on. It's about that split-second realization.
This is making me realize that storytelling really relies on these time expressions to build suspense, to keep us on the edge of our seats.
You're absolutely right. Think about setting the scene for a mystery novel. You might use phrases like, earlier that day, meanwhile, at that very moment, just then. It creates that tapestry of events and keeps you guessing.
It's like those little phrases are dropping clues along the way.
Yeah.
And the author can even control the pace of the story using time.
Exactly. You can slow things down with, for a long time, gradually, little by little.
Or speed things up with suddenly, in a flash, all at once. It's like directing a movie.
I love that analogy. And we can even use time expressions to add emotional depth to our stories. Think about how you might express nostalgia, regret, or anticipation.
Okay, hit me with some examples.
Phrases like, back in the day, long ago, in the future, someday. Those can really evoke strong feelings.
Yeah, back in the day instantly makes me feel all warm and fuzzy inside, thinking about simpler times.
While long ago might carry a bit of sadness, a longing for something lost.
And in the future always sparks excitement and hope for what might be.
Exactly. And someday holds that promise of dreams yet to be fulfilled.
It's like our language has these emotional time machines built right in. But
Yeah.
let's get analytical for a second. Can we use time expressions to create contrasts and comparisons too?
Absolutely. It's all about finding those subtle connections and distinctions between events. Phrases like previously, formerly, in the past, nowadays, currently, at present, in the meantime, simultaneously, concurrently. All these help highlight those relationships.
So if I wanted to say that I used to be a night owl, but now I'm an early bird, I could say, previously I stayed up late, but nowadays I'm up before the sun.
Perfect example. You've clearly shown the contrast using previously and nowadays.
I'm starting to see how these time expressions are like the spices in our language. They add flavor and complexity to our sentences.
That's a great way to put it. And just like with spices, the key is to use them intentionally and not overdo it.
Okay, ready for a real challenge. How do we express cause and effect using time?
Another great question. We can use phrases like therefore, consequently, as a result, because of, due to, thanks to, since, as, so, to connect those events that have a cause and effect relationship.
So if I wanted to say I missed the bus because I overslept, I could say, due to oversleeping, I missed my bus.
Exactly. You clearly linked the cause and effect with due to.
I'm starting to feel like a time detective, piecing together the clues of language.
I love that image. And the more we explore these time expressions, the more we realize how much they shape our understanding of time itself.
It's really mind-blowing how these seemingly small words and phrases can have such a profound impact on how we perceive and experience time.
It really is.
So we've talked about how different cultures view time, and even how our own brains can play tricks on us. It's wild to think that time is both this constant thing, A and D, something we each experience so differently.
Right. And speaking of individual experiences, think about how differently we can feel time passing.
Oh, tell me about it. Some days feel like they take forever, others are gone in a flash. Why is that?
Well, a lot of things affect our inner sense of time, our mood, what we're focusing on, even how old we are.
So it's not just me being impatient. There's a reason time seems to slow down when I'm waiting for something.
Exactly. And research actually shows that there are changes in brain activity that go along with these subjective time warps. It's not just in our heads.
Wow, so my brain is basically a time-bending machine. But can we control how we experience time? That's the big question.
To some extent, yes. Things like mindfulness practice, really being present in the moment, can help time feel less fleeting.
That makes sense. When we're all caught up in worries about the future or dwelling on the past, we miss out on what's happening right now.
Exactly. And getting absorbed in activities you enjoy, taking time to relax, even just changing our attitude towards time can make a difference.
So instead of stressing about time slipping away, we can focus on using it well and appreciating it.
Precisely. And that brings us to how we can use language to express gratitude for the time we do have.
Ooh, I like that. After all, time is a precious thing. What are some ways we can do that?
Well, there are phrases like make the most of your time, treasure every moment, live life to the fullest. They remind us to value and savor our time.
It's a good reminder that time isn't something to waste, it's a gift, an opportunity to create something meaningful.
You've got it. And we can even use language to be thankful for time we share with others.
With just saying, thanks for your time, or I had fun hanging out with you.
Exactly. Simple things like that acknowledge the importance of those shared experiences and connections.
Yeah, sometimes we get so busy that we forget to just appreciate those moments with people we care about.
Absolutely. So, as we wrap up this deep dive into time and language, I want to leave you with something to think about.
Okay, lay it on me. What's that final brain-tickling question?
Think back to a time when you felt completely present, like time either stood still or just melted away. What was it about that experience that made it so special? What can you learn from it? And how can you bring that awareness into your everyday life?
Wow, that's a really powerful question. It makes you think about your whole relationship with time in a different way. And on that note, thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the fascinating world of talking about time in English. We hope you've picked up some new ways to express yourself
Hmm.
and maybe even a new perspective on time itself.